Shaker to kindly escort the President onto the dais. Dr. Chandrasekhar will shortly be joining us. Please. I request Dr. Mahesh R. Gowda to begin the proceedings. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. As a deviation from the norm, we have the incoming president in just a little more than 12 hours after taking over to come and address the delegates who are assembled here. Kashmir is a very nice place. We've been very safe there simply because of the presence of our troops there. When they are there, I think we can walk around. And what happens to these troops, what they go through in terms of handling militancy and their issues is something all of us don't know, we don't understand. And here we have our new president who's taken over to talk about an important issue of Kashmir and what our troops there have to tell. Please go on, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh. May I start, sir? Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. A warm welcome to CANSIPS. My sincere thanks to you all for considering me worthy of this post of President of IPS KC. With your blessings, guidance, and active participation, I hope to serve IPS in the best possible way. The Indian Army. I have been privileged to be part of a great army of us who are guarding our borders selflessly amidst great threats. In this process, I also learnt about me personally and as a mental health professional, and this is my account. I am reminded of my first day in the posting in the valley. I had dreamt that it could be cozy for me. After an 18 hours drive from Jammu, I was inducted into the mess by all fanfare, basically. A welcome of an officer or a Jawan is quite a fanfare everywhere. And then I was showed my room where I'll be staying. I went around 10:30. Must have just gone into the heap of blankets. But I just started hearing the bullet sounds. It started echoing. And the unfortunate part was my room was very close to the mountain. So it started echoing. And then I lost my sleep. Ladies and gentlemen, I was in sheer fear. And then this continued for quite a few days. And then I think I started sleeping well. And this is my journey in Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir is a state that is a gift of nature. It has a population of 14 million. It has three dominant areas. Jammu, which is made up of Kashmiris, that is Kashmiri Pandits and Muslims. The Ladakh, which is made up of Buddhists and Muslims. And Kashmir proper, which is made up predominantly of Muslims. The main area where we talk about militancy, which is discussed and fought actually, is in the area of 150 by 80 kilometers Kashmir Valley, which has socio-political and military value to both India and Pakistan. The first sign of breach of peace in J&K was noticed by Pak government, in particular ISI, between 1983 to 87, when turmoil between National Conference and Congress I at Delhi to the disgruntled populace surfaced. Pakistan were buoyed by the Afghan guerrilla war, latched up to it and fired up the concept of jihad, that is the Muslim holy war, and pumped in huge arms and foreign mercenaries. Pakistan initially engaged JKLF to pursue the idea of Azad Kashmir, but took complete control in order to train local, that is homegrown militants. 1990 saw the first influx of AK-47 and other mechanized armory. ISI increased its presence in Muzaffarabad, that is Pakistan. The aim was to gradually paralyze the state government, ethnically cleanse the state of Pandits, and render the state ineffective, to be followed by massive upstringing. The initial response by India was only through CRPF and later by BSF. Unable to contain insurgency, army was called in late 1989. The snowy mountains terrain made access impossible to higher locations, and it was only in mid-1990 that army divisions, each comprising of 10,000 troops, moved in. The understanding of the problem per se, we need to know the militant first. This is a prototype of a militant, young. Look at his face. Between the year 1992-94, increased violence and brutality led to army think tank to look for alternatives to solve the impasse. It became increasingly clear that the use of force was less likely to solve militancy. A core group was found involving corps commander, bureaucrats, civil administration, police, media, and myself. My task was two-pronged: to assess the motivating factors of militants into taking up arms and to improve the mental adaptability of our Jawans. About 700 odd militants were captured during my tenure. About 400 militants were examined. It was a short 20 to 30 minutes interview under the watchdog of UN representatives. Few of the findings which have come through these interviews are as follows. Islamic fundamentalists are the intellectual mentors of most revolutionary doctrines as well as the philosophy of terror. While the Holy Quran preaches coexistence with other faiths, Islam being practiced by Kashmiri Jamatis is quite different: anti-national, anti-secular, and anti-democratic. Kashmir militancy was defined as an Islamic movement. It preached that a Hindu state ruling a Muslim majority is intrinsically evil and must be pulled down root and branch. The Mujahids, that is the freedom fighters, who die in this struggle will be rewarded with entry into Jannat, that is heaven. Two sections seem to be emanating out of the study. A, the series, those who randomly take up to arms, and B, the group, the militants per se, people committed to the cause of Azadi, people with unshakable belief in the power of the gun. Once initiated or blooded, the Tanzim, that is the military organization, ensures they stay within. Violence binds together its practitioners. It has an adhesive effect. Penalties for leaving are high. It is more the fear of being abandoned by the group, leaving the loss of identity and of security that the militant so dearly cherishes. Religion governs the individual's personal, social, economic, and political existence from the cradle to the grave and even onward to heaven. It is ingrained that a Muslim can truly be free only when he totally and unquestionably obeys the commands of Allah. There has been no direct evidence to suggest Oedipus behavior amongst Kashmiri militants. Children exposed to sustained homeopathic doses of violence in society, sexual abuse, and suffering from social deprivation are considered to be vulnerable. It is alarming to know that it's only 20% of the Kashmiris who want accession with Pakistan, but they do consider Pakistan an ally in the realization of their aspirations. Contrary to popular belief, Islam is not the primary motivational factor for Kashmiri terrorists, and therefore Kashmir militancy is not a religious movement. Analysis reveals that terrorists have taken up to gun for three main reasons: economic deprivation and deep sense of hurt or alienation, coercion, which is press ganged, and religion is last. From the days of Afghan rule, Kashmiri society has suffered an acute and exaggerated need to belong, a crisis of ethnic and religious identity, political insecurity, and a deep sense of personal deprivation. Militants exhibit traits of insecurity buttressed by high levels of pathological anxiety. A low self-esteem, a weak ego, and a low frustration tolerance makes matters worse. Sooner or later, the die is cast. The devil wins. Militants show strong tendency to externalize, to blame society and others for their inadequacies and their plight in imprisonment. During fortnightly visits by close relatives of militants, that is the Milan, older militants showed less emotional detachment, while the younger lot were distancing themselves from the loved ones. For them, revolution in a literal sense substitutes the family. Psychological analysis also conclude that disregarding the lumpen elements that have criminalized terrorism, terrorists are not criminals or psychopaths or men with twisted minds. They are as normal and non-fanatic like the next door neighbor, but with a different psychologic of their own. The run-of-the-mill terrorist is illiterate and emotionally insecure, has lower IQ, low frustration tolerance, and a weak ego. 76% of the militants are in the age group of 15 to 30. 26% are illiterates and 48% are high school dropouts. Only 15% of the militants in captivity showed features of anxiety or depression. 10% of the militants showed antisocial traits. 5% showed substance use, especially cannabis. Here I am reminded of the work of Ms. Sonpur and Dr. R.L. Kapoor, the former in Kashmir and the latter in Punjab. As per Ms. Sonpur, the pre-militancy era consisted of developmental issues of youth in terms of identity, autonomy, and authority, which interweave with the social trauma that characterized their social and community context, along with marked sense of victimization. The militancy period is marked by themes of danger and fear, along with adventure and friendship, and emergence of masculine and heroic war identity themes. The secrecy and isolation of militant lives facilitates a hardening of the militant mindset. Dr. R.L. Kapoor and Dr. Sen, having worked with militancy in Punjab, have said that psychological alienation was strongly linked to a willingness to choose a violent option to deal with socio-political events. For youth, the breakdown of the symbolic order and attended psychological alienation has had an added dimension. They are dismayed and disillusioned by the failure of their parents' generation to stand up to this. Let's now see the attributes, the other attribute of Kashmir, that is the second attribute, that is the people. Pakistan's Inflo-Islamic war to destabilize the region is being conducted on two fronts. The Islamization of Kashmiris by attempting to de-Sufize them, to turn the Kashmir problem into a human rights issue. Religious fundamentalism made an upswing in the valley of Kashmir, as indicated by 16% increase in madrasas, that is the religious seminaries run by Jamaatis, from 1989 to 1993. 40% of the newsprint space in vernacular language was devoted to Islam. Analysis of speeches in mosques indicated 64% praise of Islam and denigration of India, with only remainder of 36% devoted to prayers. The ethnic cleansing of nearly 2.5 lakh Kashmiri Pandits. The media has and continues to shape the mindset of the people. While the media, both print and television, continue to glorify the militancy in Kashmir, it is doing so at the perils of internal security. Unlike conventional wars, which are two-dimensional, one nation-state versus another nation-state, low-intensity conflict, henceforth labeled as LIC, is trinatrian, the trinity of government, terrorists, and people. In this 3D equation, political power no longer comes out of the barrel of a gun. With globalization and common man's empowerment, even knowledge is not power. Rather, in a participative democracy, it is the people who are the power. Islamization of Kashmiri Muslims is a prerequisite to arouse the revolutionary and religious consciousness of the people to overthrow the Indian yoke. This has been Pakistan's foremost objective because the major obstacle that lies between Pakistan and Kashmir is the philosophy of Sufism, which is open, Catholic, and non-doctrinaire. De-Sufization is therefore the first goal in Islamization. When religion becomes dogma, it manifests intolerance. It then dictates politics, education, and economics. The Pakistan media and the vernacular press portray Kashmir militancy as a jihad against forced Hindu occupation of a predominantly Muslim majority state. The message being spread is that Islamic militancy is actually a part of a greater pan-Islamic movement sweeping the world over. The alienation of the people only makes the matters worse. It is slowly pushing the masses into the arms of the religion, waiting arms of the religion, which in turn is projected as the last panacea for Kashmir. Societally trauma-induced stress is responsible for eroding the dignity of the common man. Paul Weiss describes this condition as idiocide or death of self. Such a mental situation occurs when there is a denial of status and denial of stature. People in this mental limbo are vulnerable, and what Pakistan is doing is simply exploiting the vulnerability of the Kashmir psyche by misinterpreting religion. The ethnic cleansing of 2.5 lakh Kashmiri Pandits, which began in January 1990, contained within it all the seeds of ethno-religious movement, the likes of which the world has witnessed in erstwhile Yugoslavia and Rwanda. Had the Pandits deterred or delayed their departure from the valley, they would have suffered the same cruel fate as of Serbs and Muslim Croats in Bosnia. Madrasas, that is religious seminaries, are playing a key role in the Islamization of Kashmiri youth. The indoctrinated children who pass out of these seminaries are the shock troops of Islam and potential recruits into the ranks of militancy. I was aghast to read one of the class 3 standard textbook which read as, "We are Kashmiris and our country is Kashmir. It is surrounded by India, China and Pakistan." Human rights issue is the second strategic objective of Pakistan's information war. False allegations provoking the security forces to overreact, stage-managed protests, poster campaigns, and attributing killings of prominent Kashmiris to the Indian intelligence agencies are the favored tactics employed. Low-intensity conflict involves the information war more than the killing of the militant. Terror is all about terrorizing society, and media provides the oxygen of publicity. Attention fans the flames. More the blood, bigger the headlines. In the philosophy of terrorism, a scared mind is a vulnerable mind. Militant media managers genuinely believe that the cumulative effect of demoralization will affect the political and the military psyche of the nation. Present media strategy is towards media cooperation and de-alienation of the people. It is obvious that militancy in Kashmir is more political and less military. Headway is being made in winning the battle of hearts and minds. I now draw your attention to our soldiers. While the study of militants and their psyche was important, I was also given the task of understanding our soldiers' psyche and motivate them. This involved formal and informal discussions with soldiers in far-flung posts. The issue of hierarchy had to be negotiated, and the sense of confidentiality of information had to be maintained. The soldier psychologic in Kashmir is affected by a variety of environmental factors. The militants' gun, hostile propaganda by Pakistan, anti-India and anti-security forces tirades in the vernacular press, and the false allegations of human rights violations. Casualties to comrades only harden his logic and agitate his mind. The objective of the security forces is not to kill, although killing may be necessary. The objective will ultimately always be to win over the Kashmiris. As a result, the body count game is absolutely counterproductive. Kashmiris are Sufis and inclined secularists, not fundamentalists. Such a perception is being garnered through comprehensive education by the soldier to the people of Kashmir. Mental adaptability of soldiers in low-intensity conflict is all about high-speed change, chaos, and disorder. The only certainty is uncertainty. The soldier's mind is constantly befuddled with fog, noise, and clutter. Counter-militancy operations are heartbreaking operations. 5% success is excellent going. A strange and alienated section of the population cannot be labeled as enemy. To do so intensifies alienation, brutalizes the security forces, and encourages the body count game. In counter-militancy campaign, an army can win all the battles and yet lose the war. This happened in French, Indochina, in Vietnam, and in Afghanistan. Hence, the objective in LIC is psychological, to ultimately win the hearts and minds of the Kashmiris. What is now immediately required are thinking soldiers to override political and psychological overturns. Killing militants, the physical objective, is purely secondary and supportive. What is presently being addressed to is that the modern day soldier must have inculcated the spiritual, scientific, and ethical understanding of his society. It is to be understood that there are no eternals in counterinsurgency. Every insurgency is different. The only constant is a human mind, a mind that is as fickle as the summer winds and as unpredictable as a woman. Three values have stood out about the Indian Jawan. First is the readiness to sacrifice, that is Tyaga, to keep intact the totality of our values. Two, Brahmacharya, or self-control and discipline, the saying of no to sensual pleasures beyond a certain point. Three, Satyam, which implies being honest to one's conviction irrespective of the consequences. The militant strategy is to protect the war, that is, death by 1,000 cuts. And the soldier's answer to it is to protract it. Patience is the virtue. Haste is the enemy of success. This is being indoctrinated to the soldiers. The soldier's tenure lasts about 3 years in such a terrain. it is unfair when it is compared to the soldiers in Vietnam who spent just 1 year and that in Afghanistan who spent only 10 months. Long tenures produce combat fatigue and an early burnout. With about 265 days of hands-on service in one calendar year, the troops are known to average about 16 hours a day in active operations, with sleep of only about 5 hours and 1 off day in 11 days only. Common issues which were addressed to were isolation, personal safety, confronting uncertainty, operational strains, and death. I'm reminded of a group of Jawans bringing a dead body of their colleague to the inspection room where I was doing my duty. They were very sure that this friend of theirs had passed away. The only thing they said, we know he is dead, but clean him enough so that at least his body is accepted by his family. That is the camaraderie they have. That is the long belonging they have to the soldiers. This is accompanied by indifferent habitat, especially during the winters, understrength troops, anxiety, and common frustrations. The cumulative effect can be debilitating. Stress-related disorders account for 20% of all types of sickness and peak at 2-year mark. Better mental health care of troops and psychiatric treatment wherever required were overtly addressed to. Troops who operate for protracted periods under stressful conditions are bound to suffer from psychological problems as well as disorders. There was no need to hide or look upon psychiatric problems with alarm. Combat stress in low-intensity conflict because of higher levels of uncertainty and loneliness is more incapacitating than in general war. LIC are a campaign of nerves, less military and more psychological, with soldiers inevitably fighting with hands behind the back constraints. It was seen that 70% stress casualties could be recovered by short-term rest and sleep. PTSD was seen in 7% of battle casualties. This is in sharp contrast to the high figures seen in other wars. Low PTSD rates are a testimony to high-quality leadership, sound training, and inherent resilience of the Jawan. This, however, did not deter psychiatric advice, monitoring, and care for improvement. Stress casualties were considered as recoverable manpower and therefore a command responsibility. Emotional support teams were set up at brigade levels comprising of 5,000 troops, manned by locally trained nursing staff and medical officers. Some of the fallouts of my tenure, along with my mentor and leader, Lieutenant General Arjun Ray, retired VSM, along with like-minded bureaucrats, led to the following. The average counterinsurgency allowance for basic Jawan moved from rupees 900 per month to rupees 8,000 per month. The average tenure of the soldier was reduced from 3 years to 2 years in the Kashmir Valley. A posting of choice would be considered following such a tenure. All casualties which occur in the valley would be eligible for 100% pensionary benefits. Lightweight and improved bulletproof jackets for those in the active areas have just come in last year. My stay in Kashmir Valley did have an impact on me, which were almost akin to what most other soldiers would go through. Vulnerability and uncertainty are certain. I have improved on my sense of belonging with near and dear ones. I remain strongly motivated to serve better. Finally, I have been able to sleep well with some sense of achievement. Professionally, It has helped me in developing better humane skills of the art of psychiatry with added passion. Humor has been ingrained into me genetically, and more so after the harshness of life, as seen in Kashmir. To conclude, we are all besieged with uncertainty and vulnerability amongst the myriads of factors. The war doesn't end, and it continues within each one of us and the patients we see. I wish to sincerely thank all the soldiers and Kashmiris who opened my eyes to extreme side of human endurance. My sincere thanks to Lieutenant General Arjun Ray, PVSM, VSM, my chief and mentor, who guided me to work as a professional and compile this diary. This is my personal diary, which I shared with you to spread the message that we are all going through uncertain times, and we as mental health professionals have an important role to play. My special thanks to Dr. Raghu, Dr. Swami, Dr. Sunil, Dr. Ashwini, and my daughter Chaitali. I finished, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You please come and be seated.
Thank you, sir, for opening the eyes of us. We know Kashmir as a beautiful place, and the mindset of the militants there, why they actually struggle, and how our soldiers lead a life there is something that we didn't understand at all. And to understand the hardship in terms of the long duty hours, once in a 11-day week off, we keep complaining of 6 days a week work, and this 11-day a week and you get one off. And with all this 16 hours of duty and hardship, you're bound to have psychological problems, and you open the whole plethora of problems the soldiers go through. It's wonderful to know your personal account, sir. I congratulate you for this wonderful account and the way you presented your first-person account, and you opened up a diary for us. Thank you very much, sir.